LWO1 WeatherNet. Liftoff conditions looking pretty good.
The STS is ready for launch.
Ignition. Liftoff.
Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Ten, 9, 8,
Side booster ignition.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good morning. It's Thursday, February 4th, and you're looking at a live view of Falcon 9 as it awaits its 1:19 a.m. Eastern Time launch from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Florida. My name is Kate Tice, and I'm a senior certification engineer here at SpaceX, joining you from our headquarters in Hawthorne, California. You're watching a live webcast for our 18th Starlink mission and our 4th launch of 2021. As many of you know, February is Black History Month here in the United States. Since 1976, the United States has designated the month of February as a time to recognize and celebrate the critical roles that Black people have had and continue to have in shaping our shared history. Here at SpaceX, we've encouraged everyone to celebrate, learn, and discuss the ways our industry has benefited from the work of Black Americans, and we encourage you to do the same. Speaking of work, the Starlink team has been hard at work in preparation for today's launch, as well as another Starlink launch that's set for about 24 hours from now at our neighboring launch pad 39A. As many of you know, Starlink is a constellation of satellites that can provide high-speed, low-latency internet all over the globe, particularly in remote or rural areas where connectivity is limited or completely unavailable. Over time, we continue to expand our coverage area as we launch more satellites. If you're interested in knowing if Starlink is available in your area, you can check that out by visiting starlink.com. At this point, we're currently at T-minus 9 minutes and 45 seconds and have been making forward progress in the countdown. About 45 minutes ago, at the T-minus 1 hour mark, our chief engineer held a technical poll. About 20 minutes later, our launch director held a propellant load and launch readiness go, no-go poll. With our team's go for launch, Falcon 9 started loading propellants at T-minus 35 minutes. Weather the launch site is looking great, but we are keeping our eyes on weather for our recovery operations out in the Atlantic Ocean. But as of now, all systems are green for an on-time liftoff of 1:19 a.m. Eastern. With that, let's take a closer look at that rocket you see on your screen. You're looking at a live view of Falcon 9 standing 229 feet tall, which is slightly taller than a 21-story building. Falcon 9 is a reusable two-stage rocket designed and manufactured by SpaceX for the reliable and safe transport of people and payloads into Earth orbit and beyond. And if you happen to be down in the Cape Canaveral area right now, you'd notice that we have not one, but 2 rockets currently vertical, as you see there, one on each of our pads. On the left-hand side is the Starlink mission that's set to take off just a couple minutes from now. And on the right is another Starlink mission at our pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center. And that mission is currently targeted to launch this Friday. These 2 launches will mark our 4th and 5th launches already for 2021. So clearly a busy start, but off to a great start. Hopefully you can join us for our next Starlink mission later this week. Getting back to today's mission, starting at the base of your screen, you can see the bottom 2/3 of the vehicle that's covered in soot from a previous mission. That's our first stage. At liftoff, Falcon 9's first stage has thrust greater than 5 747 airplanes at full power, consuming 700 gallons of fuel per second. With the help of 9 Merlin engines, its objective is to accelerate the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere to space and then separate from the rest of the rocket at about 2.5 minutes into flight. From there, it'll make its way back to Earth, and we're targeting a drone ship landing there you see on your screen, our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. For reference, our drone ships are equivalent to the size of a football field. If successful, this will mark our 74th recovery of an orbital class rocket. Above the first stage is the second stage, and that has a single Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine, which ignites after the first stage separates. At full power, the Merlin vacuum engine operates with the greatest efficiency ever for an American-made hydrocarbon rocket engine. The second stage is what will carry our Starlink satellites to orbit. And there at the top of the rocket, you'll also notice the large nose cone. That is the satellite fairing. The fairing houses the Starlink satellites and protects them until the vehicle is outside the Earth's atmosphere, at which point the fairing separates to expose the satellites to space. Today, we are using a flight-proven fairing. Each half has flown once before, and we will be attempting to recover each of them again by retrieving them from the water using our vessels that you see there on screen, Ms. Chief and Ms. Tree. And lastly, the large truss structure that you see there next to the rocket is the Transporter Erector, or TE. We use it to roll the rocket out to the pad and raise it to its vertical launch position. The TE also routes the vehicle's fluids, power, and telemetry umbilicals from the ground systems to the rocket and satellites until F9 goes on internal power and clears the pad. At liftoff, it will retract in order to clear the way for Falcon 9's ascent. In a rare occurrence for tricky Florida weather around the Space Coast, tonight our probability of violating launch commit criteria is 1% or less. But like I said, we are keeping our eye on the weather out in the Atlantic Ocean for our recovering operations. With that, the vehicle, satellites, the weather, and the range are all looking good for an on-time liftoff just a few minutes from now. Starlink is now delivering beta service both domestically and internationally, and the team will continue to push toward near global coverage of the populated world in 2021. During our beta program, users can expect to see data speeds vary from 50 megabits per second to 150 megabits per second, along with brief periods of no connectivity, and latency from 20 milliseconds to 40 milliseconds in most locations. As we launch more satellites, install more ground stations, and improve our networking software, data speed, latency, and uptime will all improve dramatically. Starlink is available to a limited number of users at this time, but if you're interested in finding out if Starlink is available in your neighborhood, head over to starlink.com. At this point, we are at T-minus 4 minutes and 30 seconds from liftoff, and Falcon 9 is now moving into the final stages of the countdown. We're currently waiting for the Transporter Erector, or that TE, to retract. That's the painted white structure there next to the vehicle. And once it retracts, it may have already, there we go. We heard the call out, and you can see the cradle arms there, and it's moving to its pre-launch position, which is about 2 degrees away from the rocket. At liftoff, hydraulics will move that TE to a position of 45 degrees from the rocket. If you listen closely, you might be able to hear the hiss and pop of pressure venting from the vehicle and the plumbing in the Transporter Erector, and that's all completely normal. At this point in time, the first and second stages are both nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Super chilled liquid oxygen is our propellant oxidizer, and it's that super chilled LOX that is creating those white clouds that you see there around Falcon 9. That happens when that super chilled liquid oxygen comes into contact with the ambient air around it. And we heard the call, strong back retraction is complete. So the first stage should be finishing up that prop load here in 10 seconds at T-minus 3 minutes, and second stage will wrap up prop load at T-minus 2 minutes. At T-minus 60 seconds, we'll hear the call out that Falcon 9 is in startup. This means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken over the launch countdown. Just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, we light the Merlin M1D engines. We use T-Tab as our ignition fluid. When it mixes with oxygen, it burns a bright green-colored flame. We then allow the fuel into the thrust chamber, and the engine comes up to full power for liftoff at T0.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
And there we heard the call out that stage 1 LOX load is complete. Second stage will be wrapping up momentarily. The Starlink payloads continue to be healthy, and the F9 team tracking no issues with the rocket. Like I mentioned before, less than 1% chance of violating our our weather rules at the Space Coast launch site there you see. But we are keeping our eyes on the weather around our recovery operations. And the range has cleared the surrounding ground, water, and airspace and are green for launch. Now, if for some reason we don't get to launch today, we do have a backup opportunity on February 5th at 12:58 a.m. Eastern Time. Like I mentioned, both the first and second stages are now fully loaded with propellant. The white cloud that you see venting there is just...
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
Oh, there we heard the final confirmation for that Stage 2 LOX load. And the white cloud there is just the leftover liquid oxygen in the load lines there in the transporter erector, vaporizing as they come into contact with the ambient air. In just a few seconds, Falcon 9 will begin startup, and the first and second stages will begin to pressurize for launch.
Falcon 9's in startup.
So there we heard the call out. Falcon 9 is in startup. The onboard flight computers have taken over the launch countdown.
T-minus 45 seconds, I'll just go for launch.
There we heard it, our final go for launch today. At this point in time, we are green for today's launch. Let's listen in to the terminal count and watch as Falcon 9 takes
30 seconds.
our stack of Starlink satellites into orbit.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. And liftoff.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stage 1 chamber pressure is nominal.
There we see Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, carrying our stack of Starlink satellites into orbit. There we just heard that power and telemetry are all nominal. We're going to throttle the engines down in preparation for max Q. And this is the largest structural load that the vehicle will see during ascent, so slowing the vehicle down a little helps during that short period. Max Q coming up here in just a couple of seconds.
Max Q.
There we heard the call out for max Q. Now, in about a minute, the next three events will be happening back to back. First, we have main engine cutoff, or MECO, and that's where all 9 of the M1D engines that are currently firing will shut down. And this will help slow the vehicle down in preparation for stage separation, which is event number 2.
Stage 1 is following a nominal trajectory.
And as the name suggests, stage SEP is where the first and second stages will separate from each other. And the first stage will start to make its way back down to Earth for landing on our drone ship, while second stage continues its journey with the third event, SES-1, or Second Engine Start 1. This is where the MVAC engine will light up and begin to propel the second stage along with those Starlink satellites to orbit. And that main engine cutoff event is taking place in about 10 seconds. Great shot there of the vehicle prior to MECO.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
All right, all 3 of those events happening in quick succession prior to MVAC ignition there that you see, caught a glimpse of. Oh, and on the left-hand side of your screen, you can see the Space Coast illuminated by the night lights. That's an awesome shot there as we see the grid fins beginning their deployment. So everything looking great there on second stage.
Bearing separation confirmed.
We heard the verbal call out, and
Both
there on your
vehicles
screen
are
you can
following
see.
nominal trajectories.
All right, great news all around. We had fairing separation. Those we'll be attempting to recover those using our recovery vessels. Then we heard everything looking nominal for both first and second stages. It's dark on the left-hand side of your screen there as the Space Coast night lights fade out of view, but that first stage is going to be coming back down and making a landing. And in order to do so, it'll be executing 2 burns in order to make that drone ship landing. The first burn is the entry burn, where 3 of the M1D engines will reignite. This will help to slow the stage down as it re-enters the upper part of the Earth's atmosphere. The second burn is the landing burn, and that is a
Acquisition of signal, Bermuda.
single engine burn where we will reignite the center engine, and that will help bring the vehicle speed down rapidly in order to make a soft landing on our drone ship. Of course, I still love you. Everything continues to look great there. Trajectory looking nominal for second stage. Bright white glow coming from that MVAC nozzle. So at this point in time, the first
Both
stage,
vehicles continue to follow nominal trajectories.
at this point, the first stage is now beginning to descend back to Earth. It is equipped with 4 hypersonic grid fins that are positioned near the top of the first stage. We don't have any light illuminating the vehicle at the moment, so can't really make them out on camera. So we're providing you views of our second stage instead. But those grid fins that we saw deploy earlier are what stage 1 uses to help steer as the stage makes its way back to Earth. They help orient and guide the booster during re-entry and during descent. Additionally, the first stage will occasionally use nitrogen gas bursts for attitude control. And less visible at night, but certainly during our daytime launches, you can see them as little white puffs near the top of the rocket. Falcon 9 first stage is also equipped with 4 landing legs, and we make those using state-of-the-art carbon fiber with aluminum honeycomb. And those are placed symmetrically around the base of the rocket and deploy just a few seconds prior to landing. So we're expecting that entry burn to begin in 5 seconds.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
All right, so this 20-second burn has just begun, and you can see that there on the left-hand side of your screen. If you look closely, you might be able to see those grid fins actuate to assist
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
steering of that stage 1, and as you just heard, shutdown of that entry burn. That is the
Both
first
vehicles
of
continue to follow nominal trajectories.
that is the first of 2 burns that first stage will perform today. Good news there that both vehicles are following nominal trajectories. That landing burn will take place in just under a minute. Because this landing is a drone ship landing instead of a land landing or return to launch site landing, there's only 2 burns required for this landing attempt as opposed to 3, because the first stage follows an arc. There is no boost back or
Entry transonic.
there is no boost back or flip maneuver required. So only 2 burns being executed today. Everything continuing to look nominal there with the second stage as it carries our stack of Starlink satellites. And that landing burn out. There we have a shot of the drone ship holding position in the Atlantic Ocean.
Stage 1, landing burn startup.
And there we can see the lights beginning to illuminate the platform and the waters around.
Stage 2 has entered terminal
Stage
guidance.
1, landing leg deploy.
Okay, let's see if we're able to stick this landing. Looks pretty good. There we can see the first stage has landed. This marks
Stage
the
2 FTS is saved.
This marks the 74th successful recovery of an orbital class rocket and the 5th recovery for that particular booster that you see there. So that's all great news for the first stage. Turning our attention to the second stage there. Second engine cutoff is expected momentarily.
SECO.
And there we heard the call out for SECO, second engine cutoff.
Signal, Kate.
And we're gonna wait to hear the call out for good orbit.
Nominal parking orbit insertion.
Okay, there we just heard we got a good orbit there for second stage. It's gonna coast for a little bit in this orbit, actually for the next 35 minutes or so. While that happens, take a look at this animation showcasing where we are in the coast phase. We'll see you back here at T plus 45 minutes for a second stage relight.
Expected loss of signal, Bermuda. Expected loss of signal, Newfoundland. Acquisition of signal, Goonhilly. Lost the signal, Goonhilly. Acquisition of signal reef.
Back engine chill has begun.
Welcome back to the webcast for our 18th Starlink mission, which lifted off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station just over 45 minutes ago. We had an on-time liftoff, a great Stage 1 landing on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, which was stationed out in the Atlantic Ocean. And there you can see on your screen, we have second stage. Right now, everything looks great there. We are awaiting the relight of that second stage, the event known as SES2, or Second Engine Start 2. And that'll be coming up momentarily at the 45-6 minute mark. It'll be a very short 1-second burn of our MVAC engine. Now, we are having a little bit of a connectivity issue with our ground station, so we might not be able to see SES2, but I think we'll be all right. If you hear background noise, our second shift in production here at our manufacturing headquarters in Hawthorne, California is finishing up for the evening. So bear with me if you get any background noise there. If you're just joining us, we are coming up to Second Engine Start 2, or SES2, the second and final burn for our MVAC engine this morning.
MVAC ignition and shutdown.
All right, like I said, that was just a quick 1-second burn, and we're going to hang out here for a moment until we hear confirmation that we're in a good orbit. Like I mentioned, that is the
Nominal insertion orbit.
All right, so we heard that we've got a good orbit there.
Expected loss of signal, reef.
We have another 15-minute coast phase before we deploy this next batch of Starlink satellites into orbit. During this time, the spacecraft will start to spin along its central axis, and that'll give the Starlink satellites the momentum that they need to space themselves out over time after they deploy. While this happens, sit back and enjoy some more space tunes. We'll see you back here at T+1 hour and 4 minutes. Welcome back once again for our webcast this morning. We had an on-time liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40 and first stage landing on our drone ship. At this point, second stage has completed its 2 MVAC burns, and we're now coming up on deployment of our Starlink satellites. That should be happening here just momentarily. Looks like we may have lost our... Oh, there we go. There's the view back as we're going to be passing over Tasmania. Great sunlit shots there. At this point, the second stage has begun to spin a little bit so that the Starlink satellites have momentum to space out after deployment. You can actually see that spin if you look there on your screen. I'm hearing we might lose that ground station signal
Separation confirmed.
prior to deployment. Oh, but there we heard the call out, and we can see it on the screen. We've got deployment of this batch of Starlink satellites. There you can see that they are slowly separating. We ended up losing that signal, but just after that deployment. So as you might have noticed, they did begin to start slowly separating out from the second stage. Shortly, they'll be deploying their solar arrays, and over the next few days and weeks, they'll distance themselves out from each other and use their onboard ion thrusters to make their way to their operational orbit. But with that, we're going to bring our webcast to a close. Thank you to the Range and FAA for supporting today's mission. If you're interested in Starlink service, head over to starlink.com and sign up. Thanks for joining us, and have a great morning.